and we will transition to our last full talk, which is by Jonathan Pitchford from Grand Bay Reserve.
Thank you, Christine. Since I'm last, I assume I can go as long as I like. Um, so yeah, I wanted to touch on really focusing on surface elevation tables and marker horizons, those components of the wetlands and water levels program at Grand Bay. We've got sea level rise rates about 4.5 millimeters per year, and those are long term. We started our program about 2012. And the map on the right shows the layout of the sites. I believe Suzanne showed this map earlier. And so they extend from a freshwater wetland named after the main vegetation there. We call it the cladium site, all the way down to a low marsh. And it's really just stepping down in elevation as you move down to that lower marsh. Okay, it's not advancing for me. There we go. So one thing that I think makes us unique in the system is that we're a retrograding delta. And so I'm going to show a few slides that kind of explain that. So this is about 10,000 years before present. The Escatawpa River flowed into the Grand Bay estuary at that time and built the Grand Bay headlands and most of the marshes. And so when we move forward, about 2,000 to 500 years ago, um, probably a little bit before that, the Escatawpa connected with the Pascagoula River to the west. And the Grand Bay marshes were still fed by overbank events and sheet flow into the Grand Bay estuary. And you can see kind of in this map what is called the Grand Batour Islands, or the Grand Batour Island. And that remained intact until the mid 1800s. The reason we think that that has started to disappear and much of the Grand Bay marshes are eroding very quickly is that we built infrastructure that impounded that sheet flow. And the main infrastructure were highways and a railway. And we see evidence of that when we have large storm events now that flood the Escatawpa. We see that water back up on the north side of the railway and the highway. And so we have very high erosion rates here. A lot of you are familiar with that. We work with USGS on a fairly regular basis. We provide them with our shoreline erosion data. And you can see that area that I was calling the Grand Batour Island has erosion rates from 2 to 6.5 meters per year. And you can see the remnants of the old island as shoals in this figure. So we looked at our set data and our marker data for the first time in earnest with Kim's help back in, I think we started looking at it back in like 2018. And we wrote this up and got it published, kind of describing the trends that we saw. And we've since, using Kim's scripts, which have been extremely helpful, we reran this data recently. And so now it includes all 12 years of data. And you can see from this figure, most of our sites, kind of in the upper portion of the tidal frame, are not keeping pace with sea level rise. And these are those Star Wars plots that Kim showed earlier, so I won't really describe it, except to say that the solid line is the long-term sea level rise rate, that 4.5 millimeters per year, roughly. And then the dashed line is that 19-year water level rise rate. And you can see that none of the sites are keeping pace with the 19-year water level rise. Some of them are keeping pace with long-term sea level rise. So to show you the marker horizon data showing the accretion rates, if you notice that the site Juro Low and Spall, those are at the lower portion of the tidal frame. They have very high accretion rates, at least relative to our other sites in Grand Bay. And this initially was kind of surprising to us, but we think we understand why. If you notice the site labeled Juro High, that's a mid-elevation marsh essentially, or it's kind of the upper end of the elevation range for Juncus. And you see also a high accretion rate at that site. Now, we think that should be interpreted with caution because this area historically was a large salt pan complex. So it has very clayey soils. The soils wet and dry often, and they fracture. And we think that allowed that marker, the feldspar, to move further down into the soil. So we interpret that one with caution. But the higher accretion rates in the lower marshes, we think are driven in some regard by that high erosion rate that we're experiencing on the southern facing shoreline. So this shows you an aerial image of that Juro High and Juro Mid. These are Juncus marshes right along the ecotone in 1968 compared to 2017. And you can see in 68, it had this really large salt pan complex and a little forest kind of out in the middle. And then in 2017, 50 years later, the salt pan is almost gone. The forest is almost gone. And we think that makes sense. I mean, this site's getting inundated more frequently, and it's slowly losing pace. So one thing we think we've learned from this data is that, as I mentioned, these lower elevation marshes that are close to those erosional edges are maintaining their elevation in some regard by sediment that's freed up from the shoreline from that erosion process. And this image in the lower right shows another marsh complex to the west in Hancock County, Mississippi, where they built this large living shoreline, and it's doing really well there. But we think for a place like Grand Bay, we want to be careful about our restoration strategies because erosion is a natural process, and if we impede it, which we're going to have to do something at Grand Bay or we're going to go away, we just need to be careful in how we do it because we might have unintended consequences of causing the marsh to drown sooner by, creating a sediment-starved situation more than we already have. So we think it has informed our management to some degree, and yeah, there's a lot of effort going into understanding what it would do to restore that Grand Batura Island. And so we want to use all the data we can to help make an informed decision about how we do that, if we do it. I just wanted to end with a couple of challenges and mention some of the people that work on this project. Jay McElwain has been involved with the SET work from the very beginning and has either been a part of the surveys or taught the next person like myself. And so we've been consistent in that way. And then Mike Archer has been doing the markers for almost since the beginning. I tried to do them once. I broke his knife and he hasn't allowed me to do it since. And so it's been really beneficial to have that consistency among the people sampling. I think that has created this really nice, clean data set. We did have a large dredge pipe wash up right next to our southern Spartana site, and Mike is standing there beside it. You can see how large that is. It's still sitting there. It came in on a hurricane, and we're worried about it moving. It could move this weekend. I guess we'll see what happens with this storm, but it could destroy the sets, and so we're concerned about things like that. And then the boardwalks have been a chronic problem for us. I mean, we get out and we replace them, but we create a lot of tracks and we do some damage when we work on them, and we have to do it all the time. So I don't know if anybody's got any ideas about that. I'm all ears. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. I didn't ring the bell for you since you were the final speaker. Does anyone have any questions for Jonathan?
I have a quick question. To have my hat on. Um, you said that it permeated through the soil in the upper, like the mid Jura. Is there any way like to test that?
Yeah, I think we should have done that long ago. Instead of it just being a hypothesis, we should probably come up with a way to test it and do that. We just need to come up with a plan. Um, there is like a little erosional scarp right next to the ecotone that we think could deliver some sediment to those sites, but the numbers, and Kim probably remembers, they're pretty wonky at that site. So that kind of made us think something unusual was going on, like the shrink swell. If you have ideas, let me know. how we get tested.
Kyle is asking about crabs and your feldspar. Do you have crabs anywhere
Yeah,
near your sets? Yeah.
we do. We have fiddler crabs. They're really abundant, and that could play a role, but I don't think it is. I don't think that's the problem because I think we would see that in other places too instead of just that one site.
You're getting some good suggestions about boogie boards and stand-up paddle boards for the for the methods. I guess I have one more question for the vegetation transects. I seem to recall you have really shallow slope, and so your transects to run from upland to channel edge would have to be ridiculously long. Like, would it make sense to do photo quadrats, or how do you deal with those long marshes?
Well, like in sites like the one that's right on the ecotone, we have transects that go from the uplands all the way out to the marsh. I mean, I think total we have about 155 vegetation plots, I think, we monitor. So we do have a lot of them. Um, I I guess we're capturing it fairly well. Maybe they could have been arranged differently, but I don't know. It just requires a lot of sampling, and we're wanting to move away from doing it during the dead of summer. That's for sure. Because we we did it this year. It was miserable.
Well, thank you so much for being our final speaker.